All right. So let's start with the treatment section or management section. And if we can revise back or recall back, we have started with the topic of diabetes, in which we have done the definitions, normal values, etiological classification, pathophysiology of type 1, type 2 diabetes, and we have done the management of type 1 diabetes. Now, coming to the management of type 2 diabetes. So, the important treatment of type 1 diabetes is, of course, the diet that is known as medical nutrition therapy. MNT, short form is the MNT. Then we have drugs, we have insulin. And of course the bariatric surgeries that helps in type 2 diabetes. So starting with the first one, and first is the MNT. First is the MNT, medical nutrition therapy. So the basic principle of this medical nutrition therapy is providing the calories according to patient need. This is individualized, patient to patient. So the most important part is the total calories. And a very simple formula to remember the total calories to be given to a patient in the diet. It is 20, 30, 40. So what is 20, 30, 40 rule here? So it is according to the patient profile. So patient who is patient who is obese, where we want that patient should lose weight, so we give a total calories of 20, that is 20 kilocalories per kg body weight. So that is a weight reducing diet. Now the second patient, if a patient is having a normal weight but a sedentary lifestyle, so we provide 30 kilocalories per kg body weight. And if a patient is a heavy manual labor or hard working, so we can provide the patient as 40 kilocalories per kg body weight if a patient is a heavy worker. So MNT, we have just started with the management of diabetes. So these are the medical components of management. I'm not discussing the surgical. Surgical is the bariatric surgeries. So medical component of type 2 diabetes are medical nutrition therapy, drugs, and insulin. And the insulin. Medical nutrition therapy is basically a diet. So the component of this total counts. So the component of this total count is divided into carbohydrates, protein, and the fat. So here we will provide out of those total calories 50 to 60% is to be provided by 50 to 60% of total calories should be provided by carbohydrates. The remaining one, 20 to 30% by proteins, and 10 to 20% by fat. In the diet, by the fat in the diet. So this is known as the medical nutrition therapy. Yes, this is total calories per day. per day. Now come to the drugs for diabetes which are available with us, and this is a very important table. Clinical questions come from this table, like a patient profile is coming to you, so which drugs will you choose from the list depending on their mechanism of action, depending upon their effect in controlling the fasting or the pp sugars, in their effects on the coronary artery disease reduction, kidney failure reduction. These are the important properties of the drug that we should know for the diabetes. Now CHO is carbohydrate. And basically we provide the complex carbohydrates. So complex carbohydrate, they release their sugar slow, so complex carbohydrates are mainly given. Now come to the drugs. So the drugs, name of the drug, so we will make a very important table: name, mechanism of action, then importantly which sugar it is controlling, controlling, so whether it is controlling the fasting or pp. So glucose control, ki whether it is a fasting or pp, because in some patient they have a problem of high fasting sugars, some patients have a problem of a pp sugar. And now what is the important concept here, ki which sugars are being controlled in cases of these drugs. So remember, whenever there is a defect of the hepatic glucose production is more, so fasting will be increased. So remember this concept: if hepatic glucose production increase, fasting sugars increased. So liver hepatic production of the glucose is mainly responsible for the fasting glucose to increase. So we are making a table, and this table you can make on your horizontal paper, because it will have multiple columns. Name of the drugs, mechanism of that drug, which glucose is controlled, fasting or pp. And the concept of fasting and pp is, if hepatic glucose production is increased, then fasting glucose will be increased. And if insulin resistance plus decrease insulin is the problem, so here postprandial sugars increase more than the fasting. So if there is a decrease in insulin secretion, that means after eating food the postprandial sugars will go up drastically. And if main problem is a hepatic glucose production, so fasting glucose will be high. So this is the concept in certain patients, ki which exactly is the main problem. Now coming to the fourth column, and the fourth column important one is whether that drug can cause hypoglycemia or not. Hypoglycemia. Then cardiovascular effects. Benefits of that particular drug, because the main cause of death in diabetic patient is coronary artery disease followed by the renal disease. So the renal effects. And finally, the important table of side effects, unique side effects for that particular drug. Why does fasting glucose increase hepatic glucose? Because the glucose production from the liver, understand the biochemistry and physiology. When will the liver produce glucose? When patient is not eating, patient is sleeping. During sleeping no one eats. So what will happen during the night time? Glucose will start producing, the liver will start producing glucose by glucogenolysis and gluconeogenesis. That is obvious. So that will manifest in the form of a fasting sugars. Now come to the table, a very important table of the drugs and their clinical benefits. So starting with the first drug, and this is the most commonly used drug and indeed the first drug to be given. So this drug is Biguanides. And the prototype drug in this list is metformin. Metformin is the drug here. Now the mechanism of metformin. Metformin is almost 50-year-old drug, but still its mechanism of action is still not known exactly. So the one of the proposed mechanism here is metformin decreases the hepatic gluconeogenesis. So this decreases the hepatic glucose production. So decrease liver glucose production. This is the mechanism by inhibiting glucagon, by inhibiting the glucagon action. And also this has a slight insulin sensitizer effect plus insulin sensitizer effect. So these are the mechanism. Insulin resistance point to increase PP. Very simple. Someone when eating food, insulin is released, and if insulin is not working, then that food that a person has eaten will manifest in the form of increased postprandial sugars. Alright, so the glucose control, as it is decreasing the glucose production, mainly it controls the fasting sugars. It controls the fasting. So if a patient is coming to you with the main problem of the high fasting values, prescribe that patient metformin. Now the chances of the hypoglycemia with metformin is not seen. And this table is one of the table question which are asked in the exam, whether that will lead to the hypoglycemia or not. Insulin sensitizer means decreasing the insulin resistance. Now coming to the cardiovascular benefit. So it has been seen that metformin decreases coronary artery disease. That is a potential benefit. Renal effect It is renal effect means progression to CKD. So it is a neutral on the renal. So progression to CKD. So this progression to the chronic kidney disease, it is neutral. It is neutral. Understand, it is a misconception that diabetes medicine causes the kidney failure. Never. No oral drug of diabetes causes renal failure, chronic kidney disease. No drug will cause. But yes, if there is a renal failure, then you have to avoid certain drugs, or you have to decrease the dose of the drugs. You have to decrease the dose of the drugs. So the side effect of the metformin, main side effect of the metformin is, it does no, metformin does not cause chronic kidney disease. Never. Now, side effect. Side effect is mainly the GI side effects. So most common side effects are GIT effects. Other important classical effect of this metformin is it can cause lactic acidosis. Lactic acidosis. It will lead to B12 deficiency. B12 deficiency. And remember, in the renal effect, if there is a decreased GFR, this drug should not be given, because this drug is excreted through the kidney, metabolized through the kidney. So this drug will be contraindicated if GFR is low. So avoid this drug if GFR is less than 30. So contraindicated if GFR less than 30. So this is one of the drug which should not be given if already there is a renal failure. Otherwise the chances of lactic acidosis will increase, which is a life-threatening condition. Life-threatening condition. Yes, it is contraindicated in renal disease because it is metabolized through the kidney, and if it is not excreted from the body, there will be chances of lactic acidosis, which is life-threatening. Therefore, it is contraindicated in kidney failure. Kidney failure. Maximum dose of metformin is 2 grams. Maximum dose is 2 grams of metformin which can be given. Now coming to so this drug also causes weight loss as a side effect, we can say, but that is a desirable effect. Weight loss. Hypoglycemia, it does not cause the hypoglycemia. Yes, it can work through AMPK pathway. That is one of the proposed mechanism. Now, what is CAD? CAD is coronary artery disease. So it decreases the coronary artery disease. So it has a potential benefit in cardiovascular effect. Potential benefit. Potential benefit. Dose. Maximum dose is 2 gram. As I have told you, 2000 milligram is the maximum dose, 2 grams per day. Now coming to the next drug, in the list, number 2. We give B12 prophylaxis in chronic metformin use. Yes, if a patient is not able to get the B12 levels done, so as a precaution you can give B12 supplements. Otherwise B12 deficiency causes the neuropathy, aggravate the neuropathy. So we will come to that point that metformin is the first line drug. Yes, it is a first line drug. Normal GFR is more than 90. Which GI side effects? Nausea, vomiting and diarrhea. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, these are the GI side effects. Very, very predominant side effects with the metformin. Now come to the number 2. Number 2 is the secretagogues, and these secretagogues are the sulfonylureas. sulfonylureas. How it causes B12 deficiency? Yesterday we did. If you have attended the yesterday class, we have already done this point. Now coming to potential benefit means it is not yet proven in random RCTs, random control trials. It is not yet proved. So sulfonylureas include the drugs like glimepiride, glibenclamide, glipizide, gliclazide. So these are the drugs, the second generation sulfonylureas. Now coming to the mechanism of the action, sulfonylurea mechanism of the action is they bind with, this also we have done in the first class, that they bind with SUR, which is a potassium channel. So potassium channel closer occur. Potassium channel closer on that beta cell, so they bind with sulfonylurea receptors. So these are this is the mechanism of the action. And now come to they causes the insulin release. So mainly they are controlling the postprandial sugar levels. So control is PP glucose is controlled, and fasting with long acting sulfonylureas. So the long acting sulfonylureas are they will work almost 24 hours. So they will control the fasting as well. Because they will be working during the night time also. So they will also suppress the fasting values, but the main effect is on the PP sugars. So the long acting sulfonylureas are the glimepiride, glibenclamide, while relatively short acting is gliclazide. Relatively short acting. So the long acting sulfonylurea will control the fasting as well, but predominant effect is on the PP sugars. PP sugars. So here you can see the long acting. I have written the glimepiride and glibenclamide. Now coming to the cardiovascular effects. So the cardiovascular effects, number glucose control, then hypoglycemia. Yes, they have a high risk of hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is seen. Now the cardiovascular benefit, no, they are not seen, neutral. Then the CKD risk, it is neutral. The most important side effect of the sulfonylureas is hypoglycemia episodes. It is the hypoglycemia, especially in the elderly patients. Yes, closer means there will be depolarization, and depolarization means calcium entry will be there, and this will release the insulin. Now coming to the number third drug in the list. Number third drug. Number third drug is a group. Okay, on the weight profile. All right. So on the weight profile, remember any drug which is increasing the insulin release will cause a weight gain. As insulin increases by sulfonylureas, insulin is increased, and whenever insulin levels are increased, there it is a anabolic hormone, more fat, that means it will cause a weight gain, it will cause a weight gain. Sulfonylureas depend on which sulfonylurea you are giving. So like glimepiride is most commonly given sulfonylureas, and the dose, maximum dose of the glimepiride is 8 milligrams per day. Glimepiride is 5 to 10 milligrams. Glipizide is 5 to 20, and gliclazide is till 320 milligram we can give. So these are the, depending on which drug you are giving, the dose is decided. So the most commonly which is given is glimepiride. So it is started with 1 milligram. So 1 to 8 milligrams you can give of glimepiride drug. Now come to the number third agent. Number third agent is the thiazolidinediones. Okay, before food or after food, remember this point. If PP values are to be controlled, the drug action should have started. So therefore they are given before the meals, because we want to control the postprandial sugars. So postprandial sugars will be best when they are given before meals. So sulfonylureas before meals should be given. Now, disulfiram like reaction with alcohol can take place. So with this, you should tell the patient to avoid alcohol. With these drugs, alcohol should be avoided. Reaction can take place. Now, coming to the number third, thiazolidinediones. Thiazolidinediones. So these are the group of the drug which include the pioglitazone. Pioglitazone. If you want to remember the drug, you can just remember the single agent which is most commonly given. Now, coming to the thiazolidinediones, pioglitazone is the drug, while rosiglitazone is banned. But this is mentioned in some textbook. Rosiglitazone is banned drug now because of the risk of the CHF, congestive heart failure, because of the rosiglitazone. So we are using the pioglitazone. Now the mechanism of action is they are insulin sensitizer agents, very good insulin sensitizer agents. Insulin sensitizer. So how does they act? They will act by modifying a transcription factor, and that transcription factor increases the insulin action. So that transcription factor is by affecting the PPAR gamma nuclear receptor. by affecting this receptor, PPAR gamma. So this nuclear receptor, this will cause the insulin sensitization, PPAR gamma. Now what is the effect of this on the glucose control? So the glucose control, it is basically a insulin sensitizer. So the main effect is on the PP sugars. Remember, insulin resistance is responsible for high PP sugars, but because it is a long acting drug, remember pioglitazone is once a day drug, so this is long acting. So this will control the fasting also. It is a long acting drug. This will be the pioglitazone. Now what about the cardiovascular effect of the pioglitazone? So pioglitazone can cause, this is dangerous, can cause CHF by increasing plasma volume. This is a very important side effect of the pioglitazone or this group of the drug. They cause edema, they cause the plasma volume increase. Edema will be there, so they can increase the CHF. So cardiovascular benefit will not be there. There with these drugs. Now the hypoglycemia. So let's see. Okay, hypoglycemia point. So these drugs alone, they will not cause the hypoglycemia. So there is no hypoglycemia risk with these agents. No hypoglycemia. Cardiovascular benefit, it can cause CHF. Now the renal effect. So renal effect is that it is neutral. It does not prevent the progression of kidney disease. It is not beneficial for kidneys. So hypoglycemia is out. Hypoglycemia they does not cause. Now the cardiovascular effect can cause CHF by increasing the plasma volume, and they are neutral on the kidney. Now come to the characteristic side effect of the pioglitazone. So whatever are the side effect, they are the side effect of pioglitazone. CHF, it can cause bone fractures. It can cause the bone fractures. Then it can also implicated in urinary bladder cancers. So this is implicated in CHF, a very important side effect. It can cause the bone fractures. It is implicated in urinary bladder cancer as a side effect. Now coming to pancreatitis, no, it is not causing the pancreatitis. It does not cause the pancreatitis. Now coming to, so these are the characteristic side effects. Now moving on to the fourth drug. And wherever I am not mentioning before meals, that means that particular agent can be given irrespective of the meals. So there is only one drug till now which we have seen is before meals, and that is sulfonylureas. Rest of the drug any time of the day you can give. Now come to the fourth one. So fourth in the list is the alpha glucosidase inhibitor. Alpha glucosidase inhibitor. So the drug in this group is alpha glucosidase inhibitor is acarbose, voglibose. Okay, dose of glitazones. Dose of the glitazone is the 15 to 30 milligrams. 15 to 30 milligrams is the dose. Earlier it used to be 45, till 45 it can be given, but 45 is associated with more volume retention or water retention, or the water retention. Now the alpha glucosidase inhibitors. So as the name suggests, the mechanism of action is inhibiting the glucose absorption from the GIT. So mechanism of action: inhibit glucose absorption from GIT, from the GIT. So that means they are controlling the postprandial. They are controlling the postprandial. So the postprandial will be the sugar which these agent will be controlling. And what is their timing? The timing of these agents is just before the meal, so that they will decrease the release of glucose from the food. So they are given just before the meals, just before the meal, or maybe this medicine is taken and the meal is started just before the meal. Alpha glucosidase inhibitor. And the main sugar which is controlled by this agent is the postprandial sugar, because they act for 2 to 3 hours only. They will act for 2 to 3 hours only. Now the hypoglycemia effect. So the hypoglycemia effect, so the next column is glucose control, hypoglycemia. So they does not cause hypoglycemia, not implicated for the hypoglycemia. Cardiovascular benefit, renal benefits, they are neutral. They are neutral. Then the characteristic side effect of these alpha glucosidase inhibitor is because the complex carbohydrate are not degraded, these complex carbohydrate will go to the large intestine where bacteria will ferment them and they cause the flatulence, so gas formation, bloating. So there will be important side effect, that there will be bloating, as carbohydrates not absorbed by small intestine and carbohydrate reaches large intestine and fermented by colonic bacteria. Fermented by the colonic bacteria, so it will produce a gas, it will cause a bloating, it will cause a bloating. So this will cause the excessive gas formation, Now there is important contraindication for this drug, and this important contraindication is contraindicated in because it can cause intestinal colonic dilatation, colonic distension, along with inflammatory bowel disease that can lead to toxic megacolon, and it can rupture. So contraindicated in inflammatory bowel disease. Now, the it is a weight neutral agent. It is a weight neutral agent. So I will write here weight neutral. While in the above, in the pioglitazone group, weight gain occur because of volume overload. Because of the volume overload, so that you can write above. Weight gain due to due to the edema, volume overload. Yes, Miglitol will be included in this group. Now coming to number 5 agent. Number 5 agent is the SGLT2 inhibitors. Mechanism of action is they causes the decreased reabsorption of glucose from proximal tubule of kidney. What is meant by insulin sensitizer? Insulin sensitizer means the drug which reduces insulin resistance, which make the insulin sensitivity, which makes the insulin sensitivity. So thiazolidinedione, I have told you, it will cause weight gain because of the edema, pioglitazone. Why pioglitazone not given before meals? It can be given before meals, no problem. So it can be given irrespective of the meal, maybe before, maybe after, you can give. So till now we have seen 2 drugs which are given before the meal. One is sulfonylureas and second is alpha glucosidase inhibitor, which is given just before the meal, meal. The dose of the acarbose is 25 to 50 milligram with each meal, whatever is a major meal, and voglibose dose is 0.2 to 0.3 milligram for one meal. So the SGLT2 inhibitors. So SGLT basically is a co-transporter in the proximal tubule of the kidney. It is known as sodium glucose co-transporter. It is in the proximal tubule. So what happens when glucose is filtered through the glomeruli? It is reabsorbed back from the proximal tubule. So this drug is blocking that absorption. SGLT2 inhibitors. So the name of these drugs, and these drugs they are, remember, mark it, potential questions. Reason being, these drugs have shown to have a benefit over and above sugar control in terms of heart, in terms of kidney disease. So these are a very good drugs which have come up. They have shown to have a proved benefit, cardiovascular as well as the kidney benefits. So the drugs included in this list will be Kana, gliflozin, Empa, gliflozin, dapagliflozin. So these are the gliflozin group of drugs known as the SGLT2 inhibitors. SGLT2 inhibitors. Now, the mechanism of the action is they lead to decrease glucose reabsorption from the kidney. It will not come back into the blood, so it will be excreted in the urine. It will be excreted into the urine. Now, the third, this one. Third was the glucose control and hypoglycemia. So the glucose control by SGLT2 inhibitors, they basically controls the fasting sugar values. They control the fasting sugar values because they are working, they are long acting drugs, they are working maybe during the night time also. There is a excretion of glucose from the body, they are long acting drugs. So this is the fasting sugars. Now the chances of the hypoglycemia, so there is no chance of hypoglycemia with these drugs. Now come to very important discussion is cardiovascular benefit. Yes, there is cardiovascular definitive benefit, and they have also proved to decrease CKD progression. So these two important benefit makes them a very useful drug. Cardiovascular benefit, they decreases heart failure. Reason is they act as a diuretic, so they decrease the plasma volume. So they act as diuretics because they are causing the glucose excretion along with the sodium excretion. Sodium is also inhibited to get reabsorbed, so they will work as a diuretic, so they will help in the heart failure and they will help in the cardiovascular disease. Now, they also decreases the CKD progression. They will decrease the CKD progression. Now, coming to the important side effect. So, important side effect is, of course, urinary tract infections. Yes, they will cause polyuria. SGLT2 also control the PP sugars. Remember, PP sugars are 2 hours after the food, but they are working long hours and they are decreasing the glucose from the body during the basal conditions. Almost throughout 24 hours. So the main impact will be on the fasting sugars. So urinary tract infection is obvious because there will be a high glucose in the renal tract. Also, they will be responsible for, it has been seen that they are associated with infection, Fournier's gangrene. So, infection, they increases the infection of the GIT, infection of the external genitalia. Hypotension, yes, they can cause the hypotension. Yes, other less side effects is they can cause bone fractures, and very important, maybe a question, they causes diabetes, acidosis. So it causes, this is a you can say a paradoxical effect. The drug in diabetes causes diabetic ketoacidosis. Answer is the SGLT inhibitors. SGLT inhibitors. And why they are causing diabetes ketoacidosis, we will discuss in the diabetes ketoacidosis section. Ki what is the pathology, pathogenesis of the diabetic ketoacidosis. So SGLT, they lead to diabetic ketoacidosis, and that ketoacidosis is a important side effect of this drug. Important side effect of this drug. Renal side effect, renal effect, I have told you, they decreases the CKD progression. They decreases the CKD progression. What is Fournier gangrene? Gangrene of the external genitalia or external genitalia and the perineum is known as the Fournier's gangrene. But this drug, these side effect, they are less than the benefit that you are getting from the drug. So these are the wonder drugs, you can say. These side effects, the risk benefit ratio is more in favor of benefit, because it is preventing the death of the patient at least by decreasing cardiovascular events. Now coming to the next drug. So about the weight one. So these are the drugs which causes weight loss. Weight loss by decreasing the plasma volume. By decreasing the plasma volume. Now coming to the next drug. Is number 6 drug. So number 6 drug is GLP-1 receptor agonist. GLP-1 receptor agonist. So these GLP-1 receptor agonist, we will come to that point. Diabetic ketoacidosis. Diabetic ketoacidosis. Which of these drugs can be used in the renal failure? In the renal failure, the safest drug which can be used is insulin. Safest. Other drugs, dose has to be reduced. Dose has to be reduced if there is a renal failure. And we will come to DPP-4 inhibitor. One DPP-4 inhibitor can be given safely across all GFR range. So that we will see later on. So GLP-1 receptor agonist, glucagon like peptide. Peptide. The mechanism of the action is that GLP binds on beta cell, stimulate the cyclic AMP pathway. Recall back the physiology. This diagram we have done. So GLP, they bind on the beta cells. These are the group of incretin molecules. These are the incretin molecules. So GLP bind on the beta cells, they stimulate the cyclic AMP, and that causes the release of insulin from the granules. And remember, this is a glucose dependent effect. Remember, this is a glucose dependent effect. Now understand what is the meaning of the glucose dependent. That patient is taking some food, taking the carbohydrate, glucose level increase, and that glucose level then leads to the insulin release. But why it is a glucose dependent effect? Why it is a glucose dependent effect? Reason is the GLP, glucagon like peptide, it is in ileum. There are the cell known as L-type cells in the ileum, and they are stimulated by food that we take. So these GLP-1 is released from the intestine, and how it is released? When we take the food. So that food stimulate the ileum L cells, and that will cause the GLP release, and that GLP release then go to the beta cells of the pancreas and leads to the release of insulin. Yes, GIP also released, and there is other effects of GLP. Other effect of the GLP besides the insulin release, glucose dependent manner, they also decrease the gastric motility. Early satiety, food intake will be reduced. So this is released in response to the food that we are taking, and it is responsible for a graph you must have seen, that a same amount of glucose if one take orally and if one take IV. So in cases of oral intake of glucose, incretin is more released than IV form, because for the incretin to release there should be oral intake. So how the GLP reaches the pancreas? GLP reaches the pancreas from the intestinal circulation. It reaches the pancreas. These are receptor agonists, not the GLP release. So how glucose dependent? These are glucose dependent because it is released from the these GLP molecules are released from the GIT. They work only when glucose is raised. So this is a glucose dependent effect. GLP bind on the beta cell if plasma glucose increases. Plasma glucose is increased, so they act only due to that response, whether it is a naturally occurring or whether it is a agonist. Now coming to the GLP molecules, they are degraded by DPP4 enzyme in the blood. DPP4 enzyme degrade the GLP molecules. So DPP is dipeptyl peptidase. So the natural GLP is degraded in our body by DPP4 enzyme. So that will become the mechanism of next drug, And before going to the next drug, let's complete the table of these agonist, the GLP-1 agonist. So these agonists are exenatide, then liraglutide, dulaglutide, these are the GLP agonist. So these agonists work and they will cause the release of insulin in a glucose dependent fashion. And the most commonly used here is liraglutide. This is most commonly used agent, most commonly used agent. Now, whether it will cause hypoglycemia, answer is it will not cause hypoglycemia because it is a glucose dependent action. So hypoglycemia will not be seen here. The type of the control with these agents are, they decreases the, they cause insulin release, so they will cause the pp reduction, this is the main effect, of the GLP-1 receptor agonist, pp. Now, coming to the hypoglycemia is not seen with this agent as it is a glucose dependent effect. Now, the cardiovascular benefit, it has been seen with only liraglutide. Benefit, and main cardiovascular benefit was by weight reduction. It causes excessive weight reduction. In some countries it is approved only for obesity without diabetes, Why glucose dependent? Remember the physiology of the insulin release. When the glucose level increased, glucose will enter the cell and then it start the pathway. That pathway will be helped by GLP. And then insulin will be released. Now, coming to the liraglutide causes the cardiovascular benefit by weight reduction, So, while renal effect, it is neutral. Renal effects. Now, coming to the how it causes the weight loss. The main effect of weight loss here is early satiety, loss of appetite. It causes the weight loss due to loss of appetite due to early satiety. So the main side effect here is weight loss. While the important side effect here is it causes the cancer risk, and that cancer is medullary thyroid cancer. Medullary thyroid cancer is one of the important side effect of this agent. Examples for GLP analog that I have done here. These are the examples. These are the examples, and most commonly used agent is liraglutide, because it has shown to have a cardiovascular benefit. Cardiovascular benefit, and it causes the extreme weight loss. It causes the extreme weight loss. Liraglutide. Liraglutide. Taken before the meals. So yes, it is taken before the meals. So before meals. Before the meals. Now the dose of liraglutide is 0.6 to 1.2 micrograms. It is injectable, subcutaneous, injectable, subcutaneous. 0.6 to 1.2 micrograms is the dose, and it is used, it is approved in obesity, even without diabetes. Liraglutide is a DPP4 inhibitor. No, liraglutide is not a GPP4 inhibitor. It is a GLP-1 receptor agonist. Now, coming to the DPP4 inhibitors. So mechanism of action increases the T half of GLP-1 or incretins, or the incretin. The DPP4 inhibitors, like we have done above, DPP4 enzyme inhibit the GLP-1, degrade the GLP-1. So we give the DPP4 inhibitor, so they will increase the T half of GLP-1. And the example of these agents are sitagliptin, then it is vildagliptin, it is linagliptin, so these are the four available gliptins. These are known as the four available gliptins, as a group gliptins. So these gliptins, they inhibit the DPP4 and they increase the T half of the GLP-1. And which sugar they will be controlling? Obviously they will be controlling the PP sugars, postprandial sugars, because this is a glucose dependent action. Hypoglycemia, no, they does not cause hypoglycemia per se. Now about the cardiovascular benefit, they are neutral. Renal benefit, neutral. And very important point in this group is that is the linagliptin is safest in CKD, no dose reduction. Indeed, this question came last year in the AIIMS. Patient has a CKD, there is a risk of urinary bladder cancer, there is the patient has got the family history of medullary thyroid cancer. So in that case, the safest drug will be the CKD patient is linagliptin. Linagliptin will be the safest drug. Now, the side effect, important side effect of these agents are DPP4 inhibitor, that is a rare side effect but possible, and that is acute pancreatitis. And these agents are weight neutral. these are the weight neutral agents. Weight neutral agents. So they have a low potency than their GLP-1 agonist. Low potency than the GLP-1 agonist. So they number 8 agent. That agent is dopamine agonist. It causes, it is a mild insulin sensitizer. So dopamine agonist. Dopamine agonist is a mild insulin sensitizer. Mild insulin sensitizer. So this agent, which is approved in type 2 diabetes mellitus, and because it is a insulin sensitizer, so mainly controlling the PP sugar values with no hypoglycemia risk. It is just a insulin sensitizer agent. That agent is bromocriptine. That agent is the bromocriptine, and it is having no as such benefit for cardiovascular and renal. Bromocriptine. And this bromocriptine should be taken in early morning, so the circadian rhythm of the dopamine is matched. And that will have a effect. Bromocriptine. So they should be taken as soon as the patient wakes up in the morning. Bromocriptine is used in other indications like Parkinson, etc. Now, so these are the drugs which are given for a patient of type 2 diabetes. So the selection of these drugs is done on the basis of patient to patient, कि which patient is obese, which patient has CHF, which patient has CKD. So accordingly these agents are chosen. So now we will take a break here. So coming back, all of you. Now comes the protocol for the management of type 2 diabetes. So side effects of bromocriptine are non-specific side effects. So they will be like nausea, dizziness, vomiting. These are the side effects: nausea, vomiting, dizziness, non-specific side effects. Now coming to the protocol for type 2 diabetes management. So in this protocol, first thing we have to decide कि what is the level of patient sugar values. On the basis of that, we start with a single drug or a double drug or a insulin along with the drugs. So protocol for type 2 diabetes management. So that protocol says, journal guideline, if there is the hyperglycemia, depending on the hyperglycemia, the drugs, if it is a mild hyperglycemia, mild is the fasting sugar values, and this hyperglycemia is the fasting sugar values that we take. Okay, so the fasting value, if the fasting value is 126 to 199, then we start with a single drug. We start with a single drug. If it is a moderate hyperglycemia, like 200 to 250, so we will start with the agents double agents. If it is a moderate means it is 250 to 300, then we can use triple drugs or insulin. But if it is very severe, more than 300 fasting, then insulin has to be started. So this is a broad guideline to initiate the drugs. So it is based on the finding that a particular drug, remember, a particular drug reduces the HbA1c by 1 or 1.5. So if HbA1c is very high, then we have to give the two or more than two drugs depending on the values of sugars. So side effect of the bromocriptine, as I have told you, it is nausea, vomiting and dizziness, non-specific side effects of the bromocriptine. What if fasting is 100 to 126? Then it is not diabetes, that is a pre-diabetes. Only lifestyle modification will be done in that case. So if it is 126 to 199, give a single drug. 200 to 250, double agent should be given. 250 to 300, triple drugs or insulin will be initiated. More than 300, definitely it is insulin to be given more than 300. Now if we are starting the patient on a single drug, so let's assume that patient is coming to us with the fasting sugars till 199. So there will be the important protocol that says patient should be started on lifestyle modifications plus metformin. If HbA1c is normal and fasting values are high, then only lifestyle modification will be done. So the protocol for type 2 diabetes, the first step will be, we will start the patient on lifestyle modification. Lifestyle modification is that it will be a medical nutrition therapy and exercise, that will be, and the initial drug of choice is always a metformin. Now then you assess comorbid conditions. And these comorbid conditions, if they are present or absent. Assess the comorbid conditions, and three important comorbid conditions are taken. These conditions are: number one, if atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease is present It is the most common cause of death in diabetes patients. So what we have done, we have started the patient on metformin, and if atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease is present in the patient, then in that case we will add either SGLT2 inhibitor, because they have a proved benefit. They will decrease the mortality of the patient, because not only we want to control the sugar, we want to decrease the mortality rate. So give SGLT2 inhibitors, or remember the table. I have taken very selective points in that table so that we can decide the management according to individual patient. So other agent which we can use here is liraglutide, because that has also shown to decrease the cardiovascular events. Then if a patient has heart failure, add SGLT2 inhibitor. SGLT2 inhibitor. Or if patient has a low GFR, that means GFR is 30 to 60, or we can say a low GFR patient, that means we have to decrease. So we have to decrease the CKD progression. So to decrease CKD progression, add SGLT2 inhibitors, because second most common cause of death in diabetes is kidney disease, So these agents will be added according to the comorbid condition of the patient, SGLT2 inhibitors. Remember, linagliptin can be given in a GFR, but linagliptin will not decrease the progression. It will not decrease the progression. So we want to give a drug which will decrease the progression. So why not DPP4? DPP4 will not decrease the progression, though they can be given in this GFR. Now come to the next portion of the patient. Ki patient does not have these conditions. So what we will do? We will assess the HbA1c. Repeat, HbA1c. If high, then we will add another agent. Depending on patient profile. So if a patient is having any other endocrine disease, so that will be treated simultaneously. No, metformin will be contraindicated when the GFR is less than 30. Then we will stop the metformin. So less than 30, and if it is less than 60, we will reduce the dose of the metformin. Less than 60. So this will be the anti-diabetic medicine. Remember ACE inhibitor, we will come to that ACE inhibitor in the nephropathy section also. Here we are talking only about the anti-hypertensive agents, anti-diabetic agent. Now, is one value of fasting okay to start the drugs? No. As I told you in the first class, diabetes diagnosis should be proved on two occasions. Then we go ahead. Then we go ahead. Now, coming to if a patient, we have given the metformin and we there is no comorbid conditions of these three: atherosclerotic disease, heart failure, and kidney failure. There is nothing like that. So, in that case, we will take only these three comorbid condition for assessment. Now, what we will do if HbA1c is still high, then according to the patient, we will add another agents. So if patient is obese, therefore recall back the importance of weight. Why these questions are asked in your exams, ki which drug causes weight loss, which is weight neutral, and which is weight gain drugs. So if a patient is obese and HbA1c is high, so in that case we will add those drugs which leads to weight reduction, which will lead to the weight reduction, and those agents are GLP 1 agonist or SGLT2 inhibitor. SGLT2 inhibitor. Now, if the concern is if hypoglycemia to be avoided, example, elderly population. So in that group, we will give those agents which are cross for hypoglycemia in our table. So in that case, we will go for DPP4 inhibitors. We will go for pioglitazone, SGLT inhibitor, or GLP-1 agonist, or why not metformin? Metformin is started in the beginning. Metformin was started in the beginning, so metformin was not effective in our patient, so we have to add another agent. If HbA1c is still high, high, increases the sensitivity of insulin, it causes weight gain? No. Metformin causes a slight weight loss because of loss of appetite, because of GI side effects. Metformin causes the weight loss, slight weight loss. Now the third condition, and third condition is very important for Indian scenario. Reason being, these agents, especially the SGLT inhibitors and GLP-1 agonists, are very costly. These are very costly agents. So if cost of drug to be reduced, because costly drugs are DPP4 inhibitor, GLP-1 and SGLT. These are very, very costly drugs. One drug cost around the SGLT or DPP4 cost around 45 to 50 rupees one tablet, and GLP-1 agonist come in thousands. It is 3 to 4,000 rupees. So these are costly drugs. So in that case we will go for the, if cost is a factor, then go for sulfonylureas or pioglitazone. Pioglitazone. Yes, acarbose we can go for. So if drug cost factor is there, we can go for the acarbose. But acarbose, they are very low potency drugs. They are very low potency drugs. And remember, acarbose is to be given when PP is a problem. When postprandial is a problem, then we will go for a acarbose therapy. What if patient is not obese? So if a patient is not obese, then we will go for sulfonylureas or pioglitazone. So these agents can be given if patient not obese. Patient not obese. Yes, it is after the 2 grams of the metformin. 2 grams of the metformin we can give. Now coming to even if sugars are not controlled, then we will go for the insulin therapy. So this is the protocol. This is a 2020 protocol for management protocol of type 2 diabetes patients. Type 2 diabetes patients. Now, can we give acarbose in type 1 diabetes? We can give, but the textbook says that only one drug is approved besides insulin is amylin. This is not approved. Acarbose is not approved for type 1 diabetes patient. So HbA1c. HbA1c is usually repeated after 3 months. It is usually repeated after 3 months. So if I summarize the protocol for you once again. So in the protocol, lifestyle modification plus metformin should be started, and we will assess the comorbid conditions. And if comorbid conditions are present, 3 comorbid conditions are taken: atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, heart failure, and CKD. These will be the agents which will be added irrespective of HbA1c. Irrespective of the HbA1c, because we want to decrease the mortality of the patient from these comorbid conditions. While if these comorbid conditions are not present and HbA1c is still high, so depending on the three patient profile, we will add other agents. We will add the other agents depending on the patient profile. If HbA1c is normalized, then we will not go to the further steps. We will not go to the further step. We will continue with the above drug, and maybe we can reduce the drug as well. So that means if HbA1c is high, then we have to add, but if HbA1c is normal, then we don't have to add any medications. Now coming to even if sugars are not controlled, then what to do? We keep on adding the drugs. We keep on adding the drugs from different classes. So then comes the role of insulin. In type 2 diabetes. In type 2 diabetes. So role and protocol for insulin in type 2 diabetes. So the indications of the insulin in type 2 diabetes. Indications: fasting sugars more than 300, fasting glucose. Second, HbA1c more than 10%, more than the 10%. How much time we will do the HbA1c? We will be coming to that point. We do it 3 monthly. We'll do it 3 monthly. What is the frequency of metformin? Frequency of metformin can be twice a day. Usually we start with low dose like 500 milligram twice a day, then increase to 1 gram twice a day. and it is sustained release, usually to decrease the GI side effects. Is there any recommendation for triple drug therapy drugs to be combined? Maximum combined two drugs, but pharma companies combine three drugs, which is not advisable. So two drug combination plus one single drug should be given to the patient. Now the third indication is patient symptomatic due to hyperglycemia. Patient is symptomatic due to hyperglycemia. So these are the three indications for starting the insulin therapy. So how this insulin is started? So protocol: always start with basal insulin. Other indication in type 2 diabetes is if there is glucose is not controlled with the three drugs, then we will go for the basal insulin. Yes, treatment is only after assessment of the HbA1c. Other indications can be, yes, patient is undergoing for surgery, but that is not absolute indication. Even in surgery we can give the drugs. That is not absolute indication for insulin therapy. Now start with the basal insulin, and this basal insulin dose is usually start with 10 units. Or so this is the insulin, basal insulin. Yesterday we did like glargine, we will start with the basal insulin. So there will be next step. We will assess the fasting plasma glucose. So after 3 days, so assess fasting glucose. Assess the fasting glucose. If high, increase 2 units every third day. So we start with the basal insulin of 10 units, assess the fasting glucose, and if the fasting glucose is still high, every third day we increase 2 units. We keep on increasing the 2 units. Now if targets are achieved, continue with that basal insulin, but if it is still not achieved, so if HbA1c still high, basal insulin dose with the basal insulin dose of more than 0.5 units per kg per day. So we are making the protocol if sugars are not controlled. If sugars are controlled, then we stick to that dose. So we keep on increasing 2 units every third day, and if the HbA1c is still high with a dose of 0.5 units per kg, then we will add bolus insulin with largest meal will add the bolus insulin with the largest meal, the heaviest meal which patient is taking, we will add that bolus insulin dose, and that bolus insulin dose is usually started with 4 units. 4 units. So first we start with the basal dose, and if basal dose is till more than 0.5 units per kg per day, then we will add the bolus insulin with the largest meal, and we will follow the same protocol. We will and continue with basal insulin, continue with the basal insulin, whatever patient is taking, and we will increase the dose of bolus every 3 days. By 2 units. So we will add the bolus insulin with the largest meal, so single bolus is added, and we keep on increasing the dose every 3rd day by 2 units each. And if with 1 bolus and 1 basal, even if HbA1c still high, if HbA1c is still high, then we have 2 options. So the 2 option here will be either add all 3 bolus along with basal insulin, or twice daily pre-mix insulin. So there are 2 options in this protocol, that with the basal and bolus, single basal and single bolus, if sugars are not controlled, then we will shift the patient to all the 3 meals bolus insulins plus basal, or we shift the patient to a premix insulin. What is the premix insulin? This is a twice daily insulin in which the short acting and long acting insulin both are present. So we will shift the patient to a premix insulin, in which the 2/3 dose given in the morning and 1/3 dose given in the night. So this is how to proceed. We check HbA1c every 3 months. We will check the HbA1c every 3 months, not days. We check the sugars every 3 days. Based on glucose values. No role of PP glucose in insulin protocol. This is a PP glucose. Bolus control the PP. So if you are giving the bolus, look for the PP values, and do the HbA1c. If HbA1c is still high, then shift the patient to multiple bolus with basal or twice daily premix insulin. Now coming to the monitoring of the patient. Targets. So the target of the patient, they are mainly HbA1c. HbA1c. Then fasting capillary glucose. Fasting capillary glucose. Then the postprandial capillary glucose. So the fasting capillary glucose and postprandial capillary glucose, they are with self monitoring of blood glucose machine at home. These are the targets which patient will check with self glucose monitoring at home. So HbA1c target is less than 7%. Fasting capillary glucose, it is 80 to 130, and postprandial capillary glucose should be kept below 180 milligrams per deciliter. So these are the important targets for a patient with diabetes. For a patient with diabetes. Why capillary glucose? Because capillary glucose is home monitoring. It is done at home with the home monitoring. These targets are set because patient may not be able to go to the lab every third day. Every third day patient will not go to the lab. Patient will check the sugars. Patient will check the sugars at home. So in the lab 3 monthly HbA1c is done. So the frequency of HbA1c monitoring is monitoring frequency. It is 3 monthly if treatment is changed, and 6 monthly if treatment not changed and targets are under control. So this is the frequency of HbA1c monitoring, that it should be done every 3 months if we are changing the dose of the patient. We are changing the dose of the patient, and it should be done 6 monthly, twice a year, if treatment is not changed and patient is achieving the targets of the sugar, which are 80 to 130 fasting or preprandial, and postprandial of less than 180. So this is the protocol, the latest protocol of type 2 diabetes, and with this we finish with the class for today. And today we have done the management of type 2 diabetes. Now tomorrow then we will discuss the complications of the diabetes, and my advice is you read the biochemistry. Come prepare with the biochemistry, especially the free fatty acid metabolism and ketone body. So if you read the biochemistry, then you will be able to understand the clinicals of ketoacidosis as a complication. So with this we finish with the class for today.